Roll call.
Pauls. Palermo.
Here.
Festerson. Gray.
Here.
Harding. Melton. And Jerem is absent.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks by Councilmember Gray.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me just say very quickly that this past weekend we've had some challenges. We've had an individual who was charged with by the grand jury, and he took his own life. And those issues have caused great concern and great consternation in our community, but it is also an opportunity for us to take the chance, if we are willing to change. It's a chance for us to begin to come together. We need to still recognize our differences and work through our differences, but it's an opportunity. You know, it's a crisis, but I've often heard a crisis is described as a dangerous opportunity. And we have an opportunity to come together, if we will. We've got to end. The only way that our society will ever be complete is once we come together and recognize that we're all the same and there's no differences between any of us other than skin color, which should not matter in the first place. Thank you all.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. We thank you for joining us today. As a courtesy to those in attendance, to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask you to turn off or silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Item 6, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC overlay district to incorporate into that district the property located at 189th Street and West Maple Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing for agenda item number 6 is today. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Pauls. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing for agenda item number 7 was held on September 15th, 2020. Roll call.
Pauls. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 8 through 16 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item, number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent.
In the consent agenda for its own reading.
Yes. Okay. Poll item number 15.
Item 15 is removed.
Okay. Vote on that.
No, we'll vote on
Okay.
consent first, after the public hearing.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Avery Schwer. This is my wife, Marilyn. I'm Vice President of the Midtown Neighborhood Alliance. We represent over 17 neighborhoods in the Midtown area.
Sir, can I ask you, what number are you here on?
On number 15,
We're not on that yet.
amendments to the park rules.
We're going to do 8 through 14 and 16 first,
Oh,
and then we'll call up 15 separately.
I misunderstood, I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
No.
Stand by for just 1 minute. Yeah, you don't have to go far.
You didn't close the public hearing. You need, yeah, you need to
Okay.
continue with the public hearing.
Okay, that was proponents. Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call?
Pauls. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Item 15, a resolution to approve the amendments to the City of Omaha Park Rules.
The public hearing for item number 15 is today, or if there are any proponents.
Opponent.
15,
Yeah.
Opponents?
proponents.
Opponents?
Proponent.
Yeah.
For it.
Supporting it? No.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
thank you.
sorry,
That's
yes.
okay.
Are there any proponents?
No.
Okay. Opponents?
Thank you. I'm Avery Schwer. This is my wife, Marilyn. Together, we have ridden over 300.
Address, please.
Excuse me?
Address?
6454 Woolworth Avenue,
Thank you.
Omaha, Nebraska. My wife and I have ridden over 300 miles in the last 2 months on the Omaha City Parks trails. In this resolution, in number 15, it's a resolution to ban Class 2 and Class 3 bikes on the trails. I don't have any problem banning Class 3 bikes. Class 3 bikes are fast bikes, and, you know, as far as more powerful. Class 2 bikes are physical assist bikes. I'm 68 years old. A couple of years ago, I had a severe bicycle accident on narrow tires. It was a Trek Soho bike. I can't do narrow tires anymore on bicycles. I can do wider tires, but because of the increased resistance, they need to be electrical assisted. The reason we do over 300 miles on the bike trails is because as older people, we can go up the hills easier and this type of thing. It's not to go fast. We never pass anybody. Either does any other Class 2 bike riders that we see on the trail. The Class 3 we haven't really seen on the trail, but going and restricting Class 2 bicycles would really be something that would really have a negative impact on our enjoyment of the city parks and the trails. We love them. And so, bottom line, I ask you to strike the Class 2 from this resolution with regard to restricting it and banning it. And I think it reflects, you know, as far as what's going on across the country with going in the acceptance of the pedal-assisted bikes as we grow older.
Yes, and it's just, it's a great way to get exercise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be out on the trails, probably. And so, and whenever we have been out there, the people that are just on regular bikes, they go whizzing by us. And you around curves, they go whizzing by us. We're the slow ones. And so, please do not ban
Class 2.
Class 2 bikes. Because it's a great way to get fresh air and exercise, because I'm 67.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Are there any other opponents?
Okay, sure. Yep.
My name is Michael Gann. I live at 9241 Madison Street, and I'm here in opposition to item number 15, specifically on the e-bikes. I see where they will allow Class 1 e-bikes, and it's my understanding the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 2 is one is pedal assist, where it will measure the resistance against what you're pedaling on, and the Class 2 has a thumb throttle on it. Same horsepower limitation, same wattage, same voltage, everything's identical. I'm not sure why the e-bike ban is going in place, but I don't know if it's safety issues or not. I don't know. I tried to get a hold of Park and Recreations, but apparently they're busy today. And if we ban e-bike 2, but allow e-bike 1, the Class 1s, that makes no sense because they're identical bikes, just different means of putting the bike into motion on there. So I hope that this is tabled, at least pulled off consent agenda today. More discussions obviously needed before we proceed on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? And if you are an opponent, if you could come down closer. Thank you.
Scott Blake, 2316 North 52nd Street. I am strongly opposed to rule number 17 on the attachment titled Motorized Vehicles on the Trail, which states Class 2 and 3 electric bicycles will not be allowed on city trails. So this is a poorly written rule submitted by the new acting parks director. First, the rule is completely unenforceable. Can you tell the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 2 grip? Now imagine being a police officer hundreds of feet away trying to see if a bike going 25 miles an hour has a twist throttle. Furthermore, it is literally impossible to differentiate between a Class 1 and a Class 3 e-bike by simply looking at it. They are identical. This is a sloppy rule change to help city prosecutors. But the e-bike classification is nowhere to be found in the Omaha Municipal Code or Nebraska state statutes. Second, this confusing rule would discourage people from riding bikes. And what better way for Omaha to celebrate Bike to Work Week, which is this week, and Car Free Day, which is today, than by trashing this regressive bike policy. The Omaha Planning Department recently showed a major increase in the number of people riding on bikes and trails during the pandemic. And even with an increase in riders, I have not heard of anyone crashing their Class 3 e-bike on the trail. This is a solution to a problem that does not exist. Third, banning e-bikes will not make the trails any safer. There's an exercise app I use called Strava. It's like Facebook for athletes. Cyclists use the app to track how far and how fast they have ridden, and then our stats get posted on a public dashboard. I did a quick glance at the Keystone Trail. They show a human-powered cyclist, not an e-bike, going 36 miles per hour on the trail last month. That's a regular pedal bike going way faster than a Class 1 e-bike is allowed. And all that's okay under the new rules. So as an example, the speedometer of my car goes up to 150 miles an hour. And while I've never driven that fast, I'm still allowed to drive my SUV in a school zone. We don't ban cars for having the potential to go fast. We shouldn't ban e-bikes for the same. I don't know if the single item on the attachment can be struck or if the entire agenda item needs to be voted down, but either way, the Parks Department needs to submit a better worded addition to the rules. In closing, I would like to thank Sarah Johnson for finding this obscure rule change on the last page of the attachment. She'll talk more about the strain this will put on our already overworked police and how banning e-bikes discriminates against people with disabilities. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. Pete, we've kind of blown you up about this lately. I appreciate you taking the time to respond to everybody. I'm also here in strong opposition to item number 15 with updated park rules, specifically opposed to, as everybody's saying, Class 3. I'm wondering if everybody understands all the different classifications. That's kind of something I'm happy to go into. Okay, so first of all, yes, happy Bike to Work Day. Kind of funny that today is the day that the League of American Bicyclists has declared, and yet here we are ironically talking about removing rights for people on certain types of bikes. Other communities globally are quickly adapting in a necessary but positive way, as Gray said, positive opportunity, to the challenges of the pandemic with slow street initiatives, pop-up bike lanes, relaxed restrictions, and just generally more encouragement to safely get outside. I've yet to see anything like that happening locally, which is upsetting as well. Trying to put my thoughts on this e-bike ban into a 3-minute segment is pretty daunting, considering I've spent the last 18 years in the bike industry talking to people every day about bikes, specifically electric assist bikes. I actually owned a shop in Benson. I shut it down last year due to health reasons, the same health reasons that put me on an electric bike, so I feel particularly qualified as an expert to speak about this. Rode my e-bike down here today. Sold a bunch of bikes to people that had health issues. They already kind of covered that, but mental health is something that we have brought up a lot lately, as it should, because it's a huge crisis for our community. The mental benefits of riding a bike can't be overemphasized. So anyway, a few specifics. The definition, again, is one thing that I'm wondering where you're coming up with the definitions. Are we just using bike manufacturers' definitions, because from 2015, the state kind of refined what their definition of a bicycle is. I don't know if you've had a chance to review this. I'm happy, again, to answer any questions. But they specifically define it, basically, the classifications of 2 and 3 don't really make any sense when you look at the state law, so that's a problem that I have. Class 1 and 2, again, as is brought up already, only 20 miles an hour. Class 3 is 28, fine, we can talk about that later, but I really think that generally normal bicycles like motorless and Class 1 and Class 2 get grouped together, and that makes sense to me, but Class 3 being grouped together with Class 2 doesn't make sense. So we could go more into definitions, but for now, again, with the Strava segment, people on regular bikes speed past me on my e-bike on the trail. So if speed and safety are the concern, which is valid and great, we need to talk about speed limits on the trail, and I think that would really be a better first step and kind of more educational rather than punishing and controlling, which is what a lot of our conversations these days, especially as it pertains to enforcement, tend to end up with some gray areas. We don't need to give them more reasons to get into unfortunate situations. Again, just another Omaha solution, trying to put more control into police and prosecution rather than just informing the people that probably don't understand it to begin with. So information over enforcement. The next issue I have is it's kind of an ableist and classist policy. Completely unacceptable, as we'd probably all agree. Most of the bikes that I sold were Class 2 because they were cheaper than Class 1. Class 1 is the pedal assist, it's real sleek, you don't have to worry about any buttons or anything, so it just is a little bit more pricey. Class 2, more affordable. So we're just instantly telling all those people, unless you can afford it, you can't be on the trails. That's too bad. Also, as my friends behind me said, when you have health issues, it's really sometimes nice and helpful to have that little boost that a throttle will give you. So I could go on for a really long time about this, and I'm happy to talk with any of you more in depth about it, because I'm going to go ahead and say I'm the authority on this specific information just because it's what I've spent decades of my life dedicated to. The final concern I have, and this again is something that we see throughout Omaha, whether it's related to bikes or anything else, is Omaha has a communication problem. This is something that I contacted the NRD, who builds the trails, ALAC, the Active Living Advisory Committee, Bike Walk Nebraska, the Chamber of Commerce, their Connect Go guy specifically, Smart Cities Coordinator, who's working on the Harney Street Cycle Track, which just got delayed again, MAPPA, Mode Shift Omaha. Everybody that I could think of that maybe would know about this, they were all like, what? So we need to communicate better is really what we need to do. And I think that what it's looking like, and I'm grateful and hopeful that we'll all understand that it's important for us to come together and have a more informed conversation about this, because as it's written, it's just really not okay. So yeah, I've spoken a lot, as I tend to do, but I think that we should focus on improving Omaha's communication plans rather than writing policies around an issue that doesn't really exist. So happy to answer any questions. I also have People for Bikes has a nice little one-pager on like Nebraska specific legislation. And then also I brought Bosch is the motor system that's on my bike, but just one of the examples that actually breaks down the different classifications for Class 1, 2, and 3. And again, I think the thing that's really just most important to emphasize is Class 1 and 2 both go 20 miles an hour. Class 3 is the one that should be maybe the outlier if there needs to be. But again, total bike nerd, happy to answer all your questions. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we have copies of those?
Yes,
Do you
I'm
mind?
gonna. I
If
didn't
you
make
leave them with the clerk, she'll make sure that all the copies are distributed to all of us.
Okay, awesome.
Then you don't have to do any more work.
I'm happy to. You just let me know. But thank you. Appreciate you guys.
He'll do it for you.
Are there any other opponents?
Might ask you questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Olaf Burke, 601 North 87th Street, which is near Highway Cass, near the Keystone. And I've heard so many arguments, I thought it didn't have much to add, but there are two things. One is a personal account. When I moved here, I actually stopped biking because Omaha was not a biking city at all, and that's 22 years ago. And the Exarban area didn't exist. Now I go to Exarban with my wife. I have a cargo bike. I put her on the back because she doesn't bike. It's a Class 2 bicycle. And we are pretty happy on the Keystone Trail. There's no racing at all. I go shopping at Aldi's. Sometimes we drop by at Kohl's. natural grocers on the way. If you cross Man's Warehouse, the Keystone is the lifeline for bicyclists. Of course, we go jogging, or I go jogging, and then we walk together in the morning. That's recreational. But the bike for us is purely transportational. And if you take out the e-bikes, what is left? I tried to go to Creighton, and I'm banned to use residential streets. If I want to go west, I can, because Dodge is only for cars. You can't use a bike to cross Dodge and 680. If you're a pedestrian, I think it's illegal to walk in the median. That's the only way to cross, and who can just bike up to Blondo to go west? The e-bike can, but if you have a muscle bike, you think twice before you take your bike, and then you're back in the car. What else was? Oh, the category on motorized bikes. I don't want e-bikes to be thrown into the same category as combustion engine motorized bicycles or scooters. I've seen one on the Keystone, and I could smell the exhaust for a minute. That was between Blondo and Cass. So e-bikes are a whole different group. And as another person pointed out, muscles get you much faster than the legal limit of e-bikes and speed. So it's mostly the courtesy among people on the trail to announce yourself that makes for very smooth sharing of that roadway. And I guess that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Councilman Festerson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm a member of the City Council's Parks Committee, and when I first saw this agenda item pop up on our agenda this week, I did flag it and thought, this is the kind of thing that does need to come through the Parks Committee first and have some discussion on. Certainly the bike portion of this, which we just heard about, but there are some other items in here too that are proposed to be new that also need to have some discussion. So I had placed on our agenda this morning with Mr. Lindner, and we had a discussion about this, and we all agreed to that effect, and all agreed that this item should be laid over for more conversation and more work. And about that same time, as Ms. Johnson alluded to, I had a lot of input from bike advocates across the community too, which I appreciated because they did flag this item for us. And clearly it does need more thoughtfulness and more discussion, more communication. And I agree that the Class 2 bikes need to come out of this policy and should be allowed on our city trail systems as a mode of transit and exercise, and one that is growing in popularity, and one that in fact is being expanded by a city program at the moment, B-Cycle. So it wouldn't make any sense to prohibit that. But important that we understand and educate ourselves about these classifications and what they really are and what these types of bikes really do. And I don't think there's a great understanding of that yet, but we're getting there today, I think. And I do have some of the attachments from Ms. Johnson that I can share to council members in that respect. So Mr. Lindner, I might have you come down just for a minute, if you would.
Good afternoon, Jake Linder, 1819 Farnham.
Thank you. I just wanted to engage you a little bit and acknowledge our conversation this morning on this topic, and I think your willingness to engage on this issue and talk through this more. And I think in our conversation, the thought by the Parks Department was just, you wanted to be sensitive to safety and maybe speed on these trails.
Correct.
But I do think you're flexible to looking into these classifications more and the desire to move something like a Class 2 out of a policy like this.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then I think the greater point is also important, which is we have a lot of entities now that should be focused on these type of issues and should be promoting more active living and biking opportunities and pedestrian opportunities, but it does still feel very disjointed across the city and with those in the private sector that are working on this too, to the effect, or I guess exhibited by today, which is what seems to be a one-sentence policy in our park rules, was unbeknownst to any of those groups and didn't have any conversation. And I understand the concern about that, and I agree with that concern. that we need to do a better job on these issues as a city. So I think we're in agreement. This will be laid over today. I'll let Mr. Harding make that motion, but I think it should be sufficient time that then allows Mr. Lindner and bike advocates and committee members to sit down together and discuss this and walk it through and make sure we have these classifications consistent with how they appear in other places in state law and such. And in my opinion, remove Class 2 from being prohibited in this policy. And I will say Ms. Johnson is an authority on this topic. I purchased a bike from her in the past, and I know she knows what she's talking about, so I would definitely include her in that conversation. With that, I'll yield the floor for now.
Councilmember Harding, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, what I was going to say has been said by Councilmember Festerson as well, too, and I know that the intent was certainly, at least as it related to the paragraph 17, which was on motorized vehicles on trails, was certainly a safety issue. But clearly, and we've discovered in this process that we do need more investigation, more clarification as to how to word that and what to actually have or allow on the trails. Additionally, we also had some in-depth conversation on paragraph 14, which related to drones. And I'm a little surprised no one was down here to talk about that today. But so in our discussion at our Parks Committee meeting, Councilmember Melton and Festerson and I clearly understood that this was something that needed some more investigation and work. So I'll make a motion, and I know Councilmember Melton wants to say some words as well, but I'll make a motion to lay this over until October 20th, which should give us sufficient time to continue working on this and come up with the right language, not only as it relates to motorized vehicles on trails, but drones that I mentioned, and there were a couple other things that still need a little work.
Councilmember Melton, you are recognized.
Thank you, and I won't repeat what Councilmember Festerson and Councilmember Harding had said, but I have to say, I mean, it wasn't until this morning that I even knew the difference between a class 1, 2, and 3 e-bike. Literally had no idea. So I also want to let the people know, just to let all of you know, we saw this at the same time you did, really. We weren't aware that it was on here. This was kind of put on. So again, there may be some lack of communication kind of in regards to maybe things coming on our agenda from our departments, and that's something I think we can work out in our committee to make that better. But there are a number of different things, and I think everybody made good points. I think also it might be, would I like to talk to the people that use the trails, not only the e-bike people, but regular bikers. Is there a danger? Do we need speed limits? Maybe not even for the e-bike people, but maybe if somebody's going whizzing by the two of you at 36 miles per hour, that might be somewhat dangerous for you. So, and I don't know if you can do speed limits on bikes, and I don't know any of that information. So I definitely support laying this over so that we have a better understanding. And also, I don't think that what we should be doing is micro-targeting what to change during this meeting. We should be having those discussions and doing all of that with other people and not just striking things here on the floor. It's not as productive. So I would even be in support if we don't have this all worked out and with all the different numbers of groups and people that want to maybe have some input in this. I mean, I'd be fine continuing it past October 22nd even. Just because I want to make sure if we're doing it right. And again, there are some other things in here, like for drones. I was surprised nobody's here from Standing Bear, from Hawks Field, which is out there, because they actually do drone training, and it's a good, safe place. And so there's some other issues in some of these that I think people don't know about either. So I definitely support laying it over, just to make sure. We also have, there's a no pets allowed in any city sports fields, complexes, courts, or golf courses, which I don't think you should bring your dog golfing, but maybe there's a lot of people that bring their dogs just to sit on the side in the back outfield to watch their kids' baseball game, and I don't know if we want to necessarily ban that. So I think there's a lot of things in here that we really need to have some discussion about. I do support banning the bounce houses, though, and I'm glad nobody was here to object to that, because I think that they are very dangerous, and I really don't want to see those. So there's a lot of good things in here, too, and I appreciate the work of the Parks Department and kind of clarifying some of these things, but we just need a little more work on, I think, some of the other things that maybe we just didn't have. We just need to be a little more educated on some of the things that are going in here, and then change maybe some of the language, so we are listening, and we will work with you. And if you want to email any of us your contact information, I know you gave your names and addresses, but all of our emails are available. If you just Google Omaha City Council, you can click each one of us or click us all. Give us contact information, because I'd be more than happy to just shoot out maybe what our final anticipated version is, at least to the people who came today, just so that you had the opportunity to look at it ahead of the vote. So just shoot an email, and we'll make sure that we kind of get you on that list. After all these discussions, here's what we think might work. And because you took the time to come down here, all of you that did, just make sure we have your contact information so that we can make sure we get that out to you for comment before it goes on our agenda. Because I really do appreciate you taking the time to come down. Yeah, Ms. Johnson, I know I can't barely see you over there, but I'm including you, even though I can't see you. Thank you.
Councilman Harding, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I did, but maybe I didn't. I wanted to make sure part of that motion was to continue the public hearing as well, too. And if I have to, okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second to continue the public hearing and to lay this over until October 20th. Roll call.
Pauls. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Item 17, an ordinance to approve an interlocal agreement with the Sarpy County and Cities Wastewater Agency for wastewater treatment services.
The public hearing for agenda item number 17 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jim Tyler, City of Omaha Public Works, 1819 Farnham Street. Here on behalf of the Public Works Department. I don't want to say a whole lot. There was a lot of hard work that went into this agreement. Myself, Bernard Indenbosch from our law department. There are representatives here from Sarpy County who would like to say a few words on their behalf. So I guess before I say anything, I'll go ahead and allow them to speak, and then I'll remain by the podium for questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Kelly, 4803 Lakeside Circle, Papillion, Nebraska. I'm here today representing Sarpy County. I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners. And I'm also representing the 5 mayors of Sarpy County as chairman of the Sarpy County and Sarpy Cities Wastewater Agency. I'm here as a proponent to ask for your support for this agreement. I thought it was important that I just give you a little background on why this agreement is so important to the citizens of Sarpy County. About 4 years ago, we went to the legislature collectively as a group, 5 mayors and a county board, to get approval from the legislature to form this agency. Because what we recognized as the fastest growing county in the state was that we were running out of real estate that had the necessary sewer infrastructure available to continue development. So it's not coincidental that you see the cities of Bellevue, Papillion, La Vista, and Gretna located north of this. Well, it's not really imaginary, but it is on a map. But there is a geographic line that cuts across our county from the northwest to the southeast that divides our county in half with regards to infrastructure for sewer. So everything to the north of that runs into the existing Papio Creek watershed and down into Omaha's existing power plant. Everything south of that currently is on septic tank because there's no infrastructure there. So we gave up our individual rights as political subdivisions to work together as a collaborative unit for a regional solution. We initially looked at a public-private partnership, And we ran all the wickets on that, did financial analysis, determined we could probably realize $3 billion in economic impact by sewering the southern half of our city. And we looked at those options and explored them to their fullest. And then we got a call from Mr. Stubbe and Mr. Tyler from Omaha, and they said, we might have a better solution for you. So they worked in very good faith with our agency representatives, and we came to this agreement. So, you know, not only is it good public policy when political subdivisions get together, here we're talking about 6 that are already lockstep. The cities in Sarpy County and the Sarpy County Board, but now we're asking Omaha to join in this agreement with us and make it 7. It's good public policy, it's good government, and it's a win-win-win. It's a win for Sarpy County because we get to piggyback on the expertise that's already resident in the Public Works Department of Omaha. They will help us build, they will help us maintain, they will help us design an intricate sewer infrastructure that will support our growing county's needs. It's a win for Omaha because we have a great plan already out there on the Missouri River that's under capacity. It will generate millions of dollars of revenue for the city of Omaha. And most importantly, it's a win for the customers who are going to use this system because they're going to gain the economy of scale that this solution brings. As opposed to having 2 treatment plants in the metropolitan area, we're going to have 1 that's going to realize economy of scale, keep rates affordable, and that's really important to our citizens and the people that will be using this system. So again, I'm here on behalf of a whole bunch of folks just to ask that you lend your support to this and vote for approval of this agreement. Any questions for me? Thank you so much.
Maybe at a later time. Thank you. Yes. Are there any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents?
Lee Myers, 105 South 9th Street. There's a lot of hyperbole in this room at times, but there will be no vote that is more important to the structure of Omaha in 2030, 2040, and 2050 than this vote. I mainly look at it from transportation. It's not a sewer project, it's a land use problem, and it's a transportation problem. I don't see how you can approve this unless you've figured out how to move people from these suburban houses either north or east. Sarpy County hasn't figured out how to build roads east-west to carry what they have now. And they're asking you in Omaha to carry these vehicles north into the employment zone without any tax help. Without, you know, you're gonna get sewer fees, but you're not gonna get road fees and street fees. The little example of the bicycle thing, this is writ large. This ought to be a 6-month public discussion about how this affects land use in Douglas County. It's tremendous. Nothing is going to affect land use more than how South Sarpy County is developed. And unless they will pay you money beyond the sewage for transportation and all the other metropolitan services, you're buying a pig in a poke.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Harding, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner Kelly, I think, said it very eloquently, and I think it was it truly is a win-win-win situation for the metropolitan area, not just Omahans, not just those that live in Sarpy, Bellevue, Papillion, La Vista, Gretna. It's it truly, we don't have to worry about the artificial lines of a county line or a ridge line. It's something that I think is a great demonstration of how when we come together to work on a solution for a common problem, we can figure out great results. And now it's going to open up economic activity both for Sarpy and the metropolitan area. I'll try to comment a little bit about how that ties into Mr. Meyer's comments, but in a second. But I think it's the economic impact of that for both Sarpy and Omaha and Douglas and the metropolitan area is tremendous. Not having to build a second facility, as the commissioner brought up, and we have certainly the capacity with the facilities that we currently have to take this on. So I think it truly is something that a lot of times these communities, our communities, our municipalities, we're protective of our little fiefdoms, but this truly is an example of how we can come together collaboratively and figure a solution out. As it relates to, just as a quick aside to Mr. Meyer's comments, it was the opening up this area south of the ridgeline, if you will, doesn't mean that all those people are only going to come into the Omaha area for services. This will open up other opportunities for areas of development where those services, those amenities that people will rely on, the residents will rely on, will be able to use those as well. Omaha and Mappa and those communities that I spoke of earlier, the municipalities, work collaboratively on those transportation issues as well. So I don't think that that this is being done without that in mind. I think it's something that really shows the focus and the forward-looking, and I commend and thank you, Commissioner, for bringing up the fact that that Mr. Director Stubbe contacted you and Mr. Tyler to talk about what those opportunities or the opportunities that might exist that got everyone to the table to figure this out. So thank you, and hats off to all those involved. And next week, when we have an opportunity to vote on this, I'll be supporting it.
Councilmember Melton, you are recognized.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, Mr. Tyler, could you come up real quick? And then Commissioner, I'm going to call you second, and I appreciate the fact that you came down today. And Jim, could you just explain for the public how the fees work? Because I mean, we're saying that this is a win-win-win, and we've sat and we've talked about it. But could you explain how that works and how it's a benefit for the city to be receiving these fees, how we're going to pay for it, and how it kind of balances out to make it a win-win?
Sure. Jim Tyler, City of Omaha Public Works. So Public Works is already a regional provider of sewer service for the metro area. So we have a fee structure that distributes these fees to our different customer classes. We have residential customers, we have industrial customers, we have outside municipal customers like La Vista, like Papillion, like Bennington, and we charge a different fee for those outside customers. We will be charging that fee to the wastewater agency. They will in turn charge another fee on top of that to perform the duties that they need to do. But that fee structure that we already have in place, that we already charge our outside customers, we will be passing that fee structure along to the South Sarpy agency. And we work very hard with that fee structure to make sure everyone's paying their fair share. So a resident in the city of Omaha may pay a little bit more than a fee we charge to Bellevue because we are providing them operations and maintenance, whereas Bellevue, they have to do that on their own. So that fee structure establishes a framework for everyone that pays fairly and equitably. That's how we're treating the county.
And this isn't going to cost the individual Omaha taxpayer any more money.
No. In fact, over time, what this will do, this will bring an increased revenue stream. Hopefully, as long as we balance that revenue stream along with the existing or the additional infrastructure that we're building, is that revenue stream will actually help rates in the long term.
'Cause we're expanding the pot, so to speak.
Yes.
And so, in essence, that'll benefit everybody. And then Sarpy County is not going to have to build it on their own, which would cost them extraordinarily more money. So really, that's how we get the win-win. Is that correct? It's kind of
Yeah,
working together.
that's correct. And, I want to mention something that Councilman Harding said. And, Omaha watched Sarpy County working through this for a long time. And we didn't want to step into their fiefdom, like you said. We wanted to not be kind of viewed as, Big Brother Omaha coming in and telling Sarpy County what to do. But when we saw how things were going, we saw that we had an opportunity to not tell them what to do, but invite them in and work with us.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Tyler. And Commissioner Kelly. Hi. Well, and thank you so much for taking the time to come down here. It's great that we are working on something like this together. I know I've worked on you with some other issues that both our communities would benefit from down in the legislature, and I've always appreciated you being willing to work with Omaha on legislative issues and other things that benefit us both, because I think working together as two communities, kind of together as one, definitely benefits all of our constituents in both Sarpy and Douglas County. But I'm really glad, and I know I was just talking with Mayor Kindig, both Councilman Harding and I were talking about that, and we said this is something that I wish we have news coverage here. Guys, you awake during this one? Because this is something that we really need to get on the news and let everybody know. I mean, this is such a big project, and it is so beneficial to both of our communities and in helping with the growth. And by the way, when Sarpy County grows, it benefits Omaha. I mean, when Omaha is growing, it benefits Sarpy County, because all in all, we're becoming one big community, and we spend money in each other's counties, and we shop we go across county lines. And this is just such a great example of how everybody was able to work together, because typically we only hear about when we're fighting, right? I mean, that's what makes the news, is when everybody is fighting each other. And this was one that took a significant amount of collaboration, especially for you. I think you had to collaborate with all 5 mayors and get everybody on board, and then work with the city. And I know Mr. Stubbe was probably a key player in that too. And I think both our counties and cities are lucky to have Mr. Stubbe kind of looking out for both sides. But I do hope that this gets some attention and just shows what we can do when we all collaborate together. And again, I just want to thank you for coming down this afternoon to answer any questions and kind of celebrate what we have today. And I know today's just public hearing. I wish we could vote on it today, but I look forward to voting yes on this next week.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman Melton. I really do appreciate the opportunity to come down here. And like Councilman Harding said, we all like to be in control. We all like manifest destiny. And so, it was not an easy decision to really turn over the keys of this future development to the city of Omaha. But when you work with people of character, like Mr. Tyler and Mr. Stubbe, it's a really easy decision. And not only that, I think it's just great government. It's good policy and it's great governance. That's what people expect us to do. They expect us to work together to get great solutions that benefit them. And I think that's what's going on here. I will just tell you that, there were some comments made about infrastructure and the demands. There's no doubt there is demand on our infrastructure, which is being driven by the growth. And part of the reason for that is because Sarpy County is a great place to live, work, and play. We have a great quality of life. We have great amenities. We have great schools, and people want to live there. So we are going to be very conscious as we lay down the infrastructure for this new sewer support, that the infrastructure goes hand in hand with it. As a matter of fact, as we're doing the engineering right now on the trunk lines that be the main line that feeds into the existing plant, we're doing it in conjunction with Platteview Road enhancements, because our vision in Sarpy County is Platteview Road becomes an expressway and becomes the southern bypass for the Omaha Metro, connecting I-29 to I-80. So we're keeping a keen eye on that. I think it's a fair criticism that the infrastructure has failed to keep up with the development, but we're going to try to turn that and make sure that doesn't happen. But you all know, as leaders and decision makers, that it's a bit of a paradox. You need the development to pay for the infrastructure, but you need the infrastructure to support the development. So we're keeping a keen eye on it. I really appreciate the opportunity again to come down here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think this is a great start on whatever we need to do. You gotta have the sewer system in place before you can do anything, right?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pauls, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sitting up here smiling a little bit because this to go back a little bit in history. There was a period of time the city of Omaha was involved in it when the cutoff line was Harrison Street. We did not want to see any growth in Sarpy County because it would be affecting our tax base. I don't know if you can recall the road that's out on Harrison that goes into Sarpy County. They even had to call in Governor Carrion to get that because there's so much tension. So it's nice to see that over the years that we have become adults and we're working together. But at one time, Harrison was a cutoff line, and you bad guys on Sarpy County because you're going to take our tax dollar away. But we found out that we need each other to make this work. And this is, Councilwoman Melton said, this is one of those things that shows over time that good things happen. Also, maybe what Councilman Gray said earlier, maybe we ought to do this in all aspects of life. Thank you.
The public hearing is closed.
Item 18, an ordinance to approve an agreement with DRB Farms for stabilized sewage sludge services for an agreement period ending December 31, 2024.
The public hearing for item number 18 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Item 19, an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement for the HNHC Scattered Sites Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located in the general vicinity of 33rd and Miami Streets in an amount up to $275,000.
The public hearing for item number 19 begins at this time.
Yes, Don Seaton on, I'm sorry.
Please.
Opponent or proponents.
Yes.
Don Seaton on behalf of the Omaha City Planning Department and on behalf of this agreement. I'm here if you have any questions. I note the next two items on the agenda. I'll be sticking close by as well as their TIF agreements and available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any more proponents?
Mike Gawley, Executive Director of Holy Name Housing, 4324 Fort Street. I'm certainly here to answer any questions you may have about this TIF request, maybe as a matter of interest. I'm gonna see if I can turn this on. Hey, you hit a button?
It'll turn on for you. And then just focus on the top.
There we go. So kind of a matter of where these housing will be at. The single-family homes are these 3 pink lots and these 5 purple lots. And the 7 row houses are on here on the southeast corner of 34th and Miami. And this is an area we've been developing for some number of years. Everything that's has a colored in is something we are building or have built. The X's are lots that we own, and the gray lots are lots that we're in the process of acquiring. So we're committed to developing this area and improving the area. If you have any questions, I certainly will help answer those.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Oh, sorry. Mr. Storer.
Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. In general, I'm sort of against the overall master plan, the city of Omaha, and scattered site housing largely because I don't really understand it, I guess. Does everybody get scattered site housing? Can I put my name in for one now? Do we discriminate based on age or income? Maybe even color, national origin? Somebody benefits from that. The property owners that are paying taxes now will pay higher taxes, but the people that are developed will probably not pay taxes, or not until 25 years from now. Does this not maybe raise the properties in that area enough that it drives other people out? Sort of like driving cattle through the town and rebuilding later. But I think it needs to have more information for the citizens before we have a real fast public hearing, and the next time we don't, and then there's a vote. We really don't publicize enough about it to be able to get the public to come out and talk about it. There's no real discussion, it's just a hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Councilman Festerson, you are recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Vice President. I just want to say that I support this project and we'll vote for it next week. And in a greater sense, I think we need to be talking about affordable housing and the needs in this community, and that's one of the things this helps address. I think another great project that was just in the news this weekend was the ribbon cutting for the Victory Apartments that provided affordable housing for veterans in our community. That also used the tax increment financing mechanism as a means to get that done like this project would. And I wanted to note that this morning we had a broader conversation about this in the planning committee too. Not only just the need for affordable housing, but what more can we be doing about it as a city? And certainly part of that conversation, or part of that answer, is tax increment financing. And so we discussed how might we move that forward, and how might we encourage more projects that do seek TIF to include or even require an affordable housing component. And so that conversation has started to take place in the department. They've talked about it with the TIF committee, which is the likely avenue for that to occur in the policies they adopt and the products they see. So I just wanted to note that that's something we have our eye on, and it's something that is moving forward, and in fact has to move forward under legislation that was adopted this year, LB 866. So something we'll be working on quite intently. I see that we have other lights on. The only thing I would also address is to a comment that was made is the answer to can there be discrimination is no, there cannot be any discrimination in housing as it applies to age, race, or any other thing, including gender identity and gender orientation, which was just adopted by this council a few months ago. So I wanted to answer that question too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gray, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mike, did I read somewhere that you're getting ready to retire?
In a year.
In a year. Okay, good.
You got a year.
I got a year. Okay, good. First of all, I wanted to take the opportunity, I wanted to recognize you for the work that you continue to do in and around difficult communities. I don't know if people understand where this area is that you've been doing housing and have been working on housing for a period of time, but the topography that you have been working with is not very easy to do. And there are not a lot of people that would be willing to do that, especially with the type of topography that you had to work with. So tax increment financing, I think, is an important tool, not only for the development of affordable housing, as Councilmember Festerson talked about, because we have a serious and critical need for affordable housing, and I just don't think that even with all of the nonprofits that we can build it fast enough. But I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for the work that you've done, especially in this area, because this has been difficult land to work on, and not everybody has been willing to take that on as you have, and you have my eternal thanks for the work that you've done in that community. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to go in reverse order of what I probably should do, but I too want to thank Mike. Had a great conversation with Mike on the phone, I think a week or so ago after I had read about his upcoming retirement too. And although we know it'll be another year, it'll probably take that long to find someone as qualified and dedicated as you and the work that you've done to continue that mission. So I too wanted to publicly thank you for your efforts. I was part of the conversation that Councilmember Festerson discussed at our planning committee meeting today, and talking about not only affordable but workforce housing, and how we might get or look at the opportunities or what the options are in order to make those, make those investments for our community, as well as the developers who put that capital up for those investments and developments, how we can make those more successful. TIF is certainly an option, or maybe one of those tools to use, but we've asked the planning department to look at other options, other tools that we might look at in order to accomplish that goal. The last thing, I'm biting my tongue, but I'm going to say it. Mr. Storer, I'm getting a little tired of the constant and consistent ignorant comments as it relates to the public transparency as it relates to any of our agenda items. We're looking at something here that this is a TIF agreement. To this point, and Mr. Seaton, you might help me out here, but to this point, this first had to go through a plan phase, tax increment financing plan, which goes through the TIF committee, which goes to the planning board, which comes to the city council, and then goes back as a tax increment financing agreement, which goes back to the planning board, which comes back to the city council. And Don, if you could help me out, in the best circumstances, that's at least what, a 6-month process?
It's about a 6-month process to get through both the project plan, which is done by resolution by the city council, and then this is the follow-up, the TIF agreement. TIF agreement is before you at 3 separate meetings. And yeah, it is a very long process.
And multiple public hearings.
Multiple public hearings.
And multiple public announcements and notifications.
Yes, sir. It's published in the newspaper. We send out public notices to surrounding landowners. We have people contact us, and we'll meet with them one-on-one or talk with them on the phone to explain projects, and that happens regularly. We really encourage our developers as well to reach out and engage the community as part of their project, so that we can avoid situations where a citizen who is unhappy appears at the last moment as a surprise to everybody. We want that kind of community engagement, that public outreach, and we encourage that out of our development community.
And I used to sit on the planning board, and I know one of our litmus tests to one of your points there was that if the developer had not met with the stakeholders or the neighbors, we would always lay it over for those purposes. We wanted to make sure that those conversations, that transparency occurred, and all were aware of it. So I guess part of my point is it falls on my ears as being on my deaf ears that we are not transparent, that we do not let people know what's going on. If we need to spoon feed it to you, Mr. Storer, I'd be happy to do so. But to come up here week after week and question our intentions using some red herring that we aren't transparent, when it's very obvious and evident that these public hearings are many and open, as it says, to the public. So please, next time you come as an opponent, come with a different argument.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Seeing no other lights, the public hearing is closed.
Item 20, an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement for the 44th and Douglas Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located southwest of 44th and Douglas Streets in an amount up to $3 million.
The public hearing for item number 20 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yeah, again, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department, and I'm available for any questions. It's a pretty straightforward TIF agreement.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Thank you, members of council. Brent Beller, 1140 West Center Road, on behalf of the project applicant MH Ozone, here for any questions. Thank you.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. Thank you, sir. But in regards to this item, they're moving pretty close to my area of Dundee with scattered site housings, blighted areas. You know, if they just go half a block away from me, I might be in the blighted area. I'm not sure. The maps are not real clear. But as I drive around Dundee and down around Farnham Street and 44th, Dodge Street, Cummings Street to Farnham, Douglas Street's right in between Dodge and Farnham. Awful lot of nice single-family homes in that area. If you drive around from 49th Street down to 44th in that circle, you'll see a lot of nice homes that are now getting squeezed out by big hotels. How many hotels can Omaha have? How many hotels will Saddle Creek Corridor support? Dodge Street Corridor. All of these nice little homes in there are kind of getting squeezed out if you care to drive around and look at all of the sales that are going on. The movie sales, you'll see the signs. And you also see the signs, Save Yates School. You'll also see the signs, Save Farnham Street. So there is an ulterior motive, so to speak, to some of this. If you drive Dodge Street and around there, you'll see a lot of vacant buildings. Some that used to be viable businesses, been vacant for some time. Why did so many people vacate places? Now, in some of these instances of tax increment financing, you'll notice, gee, we haven't really had the final vote on this thing, but they've already cleared the land. It appears that way. I'm not an expert, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't get paid to do this. But just driving around, I might ask the question, for example, they just finished a big apartment on the corner of 48th and Dodge. And then right across Douglas Street, which is only a block, there's a big apartment building. But those are more like homes. That's kind of squeezing Farnham Street. So all these nice little homes on Farnham, that side of the street of Farnham to Douglas Street, they're getting squeezed out. Now, it won't be long before, right now, some of those buildings are already boarded up. And I know there's some social service agencies in the area. So what are we doing? Are we really expanding UNMC? Are we expanding our social service community partners area here? But moving people out with higher property taxes, moving people in to ride orbit. How are you going to support traffic-wise all of the cars that are going into these multiple apartments and apartment buildings that are going in right in that area from 44th, pretty soon it'll be 50th. And now when is it going to stop? If people don't start coming here, you will not be able to fill them. Who's going to pay for that? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed.
Item 21, an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement for the Millwork Parcel 8 Apartments Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 1200 North 12th Street in an amount up to $3,781,663.
The public hearing for item number 19 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon, Don Seaton,
Sorry,
Omaha
20.
City Planning, and on behalf of the department and the agreement, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed.
Item 22, an ordinance to amend District Number A-130 located at 4334 South 67th Street to increase the total capacity to 160,000 gallons of Class 1 liquid.
The public hearing for item number 22 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 23, an ordinance to approve a master services and purchasing agreement with Axon Enterprises, Inc. to replace and install 586 Axon body camera systems and 586 TASER 7 CEW units for a period of 5 years for a total cost of $5,476,738.21.
The public hearing for item number 23 begins at this time. Starting with the proponents, I would like to call up from the mayor's office, Miss Amber Parker. Oh, sorry, that's the next one. Well, you're on standby. Proponents, please.
Deputy Chief Michelle Bang, 505 South 15th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here if you have any questions.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
Excuse me. My name is Sean Burton. I reside at 701 North 40th Street, 68131. I come from a family of Americans who have served this country generation after generation. My parents in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, my granddad in Vietnam, and my great-granddad in World War II flying over Normandy. All of them fought abroad in order to ensure that we here in the homeland could be safe knowing that our freedoms and rights were secure. I come before you today to address item number 23 because it does not uphold these ideals that my family has fought and bled for. The Omaha Police Department already has an annual budget of over $35 million, nearly 40% of our city's general budget. Yet despite constant outcry from the public that we want our tax dollars spent elsewhere, the city continues to allocate more and more money to an already bloated and militarized police department that does not protect and serve as much as it intimidates and defiles. The intent of body cameras is to provide accountability to officers who abuse their power, to provide a sense of security for Americans who know that they are not in danger when interacting with a police officer. However, a study from the Journal of Criminology and Public Policy suggests the opposite. It found that 93% of responding prosecutors' offices in jurisdiction that use body cameras use them primarily to prosecute citizens. We have seen this in Omaha this last month as there have been targeted arrests of individuals walking on the streets in attempts to harass and dissuade individuals from exercising their First Amendment right to speech and assembly. Additionally, in this last month, we have witnessed OPD fire tasers at a 14-year-old boy, which required surgery to remove. This is not the only instance of abuse related to tasers, as our brother Zachary Bearheels was murdered by OPD, who used tasers against him 12 times. He was mentally ill and off of his medication. He was not a threat. He needed medical attention. The city of Omaha does not need to spend $5.5 million on more body cameras and more tasers, especially after we have witnessed OPD's lack of ability to handle these tools responsibly. By voting in favor of item number 23, you are voting for an increase to police surveillance, police violence, and in favor of big government. My family has not served this country and fought for our freedoms abroad to return home to a police state. I ask you, members of City Council, to honor that sacrifice by voting against item number 23. In Nebraska, we hold pro-life and small government values, and the actions of OPD reflect neither of those, and they should not be rewarded for that behavior. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents?
Ava Mills, 3509 California Street. I oppose the ordinance to approve the purchase of new body cameras and tasers. We don't need more murders on film. We see civilians being murdered in the street at least every week or brutalized. And still rarely is there any form of legitimate justice. Our Omaha Police Department has a history of torturing and murdering civilians with tasers, again, without any justice for their victims. If we can't trust our law enforcement not to murder people with or without body cameras, maybe there's a bigger problem that we can't solve with new toys. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents?
Scott Blake, 2316 North 52nd Street. I actually wasn't planning on speaking on this item, mainly because I was focused on the e-bikes. Thank you for holding that over. I also, unfortunately, have little faith in changing in my city changing its mind when it comes to policing. The mayor recently said of our chief that he is right 100% of the time. That's what our mayor said. And so we all know the TOD and the POA are beyond critique. That all being said, body cameras are a tool for the police to surveil the public, not the other way around. We are in a crisis, like Ben Gray said, and we need police oversight, not more tools for police to oversee us. But so an OPD basically said this on their Facebook page just about a week ago, after the mass arrest of 120 people. They said, additional video documentation will help OPD successfully prosecute mass arrests. So basically what they're saying is the reason they had to drop 90 of the 120 mass arrest charges wasn't because the charges were bogus, but it was because OPD didn't have enough video evidence showing the peaceful protesters, again with a quote, leaning towards the potential of getting violent. But Axion, the body camera company, is working on that. They have some facial recognition software coming down the pipe. And my favorite new technology, they call predictive policing. So when you have your camera on, it'll tell you they are leaning towards getting violent, and then you can go ahead and arrest them. These are important decisions being made by a private company in Arizona, not the Omaha police. Evidence.com, where the video footage is uploaded to, isn't really a body camera company. It's a law enforcement platform, kind of like MySpace for cops. And when it comes to tasers, they're these really magical weapons. So recently in Atlanta, a person got into an altercation with a police officer in a Wendy's parking lot, Rayshard Brooks. He wrestled the taser away from the police officer and fired the taser in the police officer's direction. And what the Atlanta Police Department has decided that when a police officer uses a taser, it's a less lethal device. But if that taser gets into a citizen's hands, it then becomes lethal, and then therefore the police are allowed to shoot and kill Rayshard Brooks. I think that's all I got. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents?
My name is Ford Momarts Brown. My address is 3525 Cummings Street, number 2. Many of you already know me. I think before more appropriations are granted to the police department, they demonstrate an ability to use them. They are quick when there is a mass shooting to point out mental stability or instability of the shooter, but there are just as many mentally unstable people on the police force as there are among mass shooters. And I think they need to do better vetting and scrutiny of many of our police officers. There are many good ones out there, but there are many bad ones too. And I think we can't just fall back on Donald Trump's. There are many good people on both sides. because there are also many bad people on both sides. Tasers is one example, but body cams is a big one. Body cams should be used to show that the police are operating within their bounds. They should not be used to scope out criminals or innocent people behaving criminally. We can use them that way, but their main function, as they were developed and put into action, was to make sure that the police were not brutalizing, torturing, or incriminating innocent civilians. And I think that they need to prove themselves worthy before they get larger bequests. Yes, the legitimate ones, the ones with a proven good record, should get more funding, but it shouldn't just be blanket money to the police to create a police state. And that's all I have to say, and I'm bad at winding things up, so I'm just going to quit.
Thank you.
Hello again. I'm Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd. Not speaking from the place of an expert on these types of things, but didn't want to go without at least putting my voice up here in opposition to both 23 and 24. But as far as 23 right now, as a business owner, I would never spend, well, I would never have 5.5 to spend, but the fact remains, signing a 5-year contract for $5.5 million when we're about to renegotiate the OPD contract. I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to just consider. Again, a lot of the other points that I have already been made, but what I would like to do, rather than belabor the fact that the police have too many weapons, I would like to kind of continue the conversation that I heard a lot of you having throughout the discussions of the budgeting, which bummed that Jerem's not here today. But I know there was a lot of conversation, and I know you were all part of it, and I'm grateful for your all, paying attention and listening to the outcries and the begging and the tears and the pleas of your community to please do something. Like, please listen to us and make us feel heard, because at this point, it's really hard. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can come again at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. I'm unemployed, I'm here. But please at least acknowledge that there has been a huge outcry around policing issues, and this is not a way to foster collaboration and support and togetherness from the community. I'm not anti-cop. I had buddies that I worked on their bikes that were cops, I'm not here to say anything like all cops are bad. I'm just saying that I'm concerned about this contract because, like Scott said, it's a platform. We're not even, if you look at the contract, it's almost 600 tasers and body cams, but there's a whole bunch of zeros on that contract. They're basically trying to entice the city of Omaha with all of this free equipment in exchange for controlling the data. That, to me, seems dangerous. Like police, don't like police, whatever. I think that the control of that data, again, private company in Arizona, is something that needs to just be kind of looked into a little bit more. I'm also pretty sure that, I think it was maybe last week when Pauls was correcting someone for, yes, this isn't how you plug in, this isn't how you make the difference, but we don't know how to make a difference. So we're just here begging whoever will listen to reallocate some of this money, ideally all of this money, to a mental health program. Not a surveillance platform, but something that would truly benefit the majority of the citizens in Omaha, which would actually take into consideration the mental crisis that a lot of us are dealing with currently. I think something that would be really interesting to look more into is a program called Cahoots. It's out of Eugene and Springfield, Oregon, that metro area. You call 911 and you can be redirected to Cahoots, which is a mobile crisis response team. They're not armed. They're just mental health professionals who respond to nonviolent issues. Like the kid that got tased in the head, he was a 14-year-old driving a car. Why do 14-year-olds not have transportation options? We could talk about that. There's so many different glaring options that are being under-addressed in Omaha, and it feels really upsetting when over a third of tax money that we're all paying goes to something that isn't really helping us. When I had the bike shop, I had a bike get stolen, called the cops. They couldn't do anything. I even found the bike on eBay. The bad guy had listed it. The detective couldn't get me my bike back. Worked with Pete on the no parking in the bike lane ordinance. was told to call 911. We worked with the police to develop that ordinance. Grateful for their time and collaboration. You know, like a lot of us are wanting to work together towards bettering Omaha, and that involves more support and compassion and mental health being addressed as like paramount. We all need help in that department. And I think that anything we can do as a community to support and encourage mental health and people actually getting the care that they need instead of surveillance, control, and punishment, I really think would be interesting. I also just want to say Marianne Borgeson, Douglas County Commissioners, she's looking into cahoots. You know, at one point I've heard probably a lot of you say we don't have the money, but like, yeah, we do. Here's 5.5 that we're talking about right now. Do we want to spend it on tasers and cameras, or do we want to say, here's a cool collaboration opportunity with the Douglas County Board? How cool would that be? Like, we could, again, bigger area, impact a bigger amount of people, and actually benefit them by helping them in their moment of crisis rather than killing them with a taser. Yeah, that's all for now. I'll see you again in a minute on 24. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You know, I really find it ironic that 5 years ago, Councilmember Festerson, Councilmember Melton, and a couple of other of us who were on the council at that time, 5 years ago, the public came in here beating on the table, demanding that we have tasers, demanding that we have body cams for everybody, demanding all of these things of the city that we could not do at the time because we didn't have the resources. Fortunately, we had people come in, philanthropic individuals, to help us make sure that we had body cameras and that we had tasers, less lethal force for everyone. I guess I'm not convinced that people even know what a bad police department is, because I can recall, and Councilmember Harding can remember, that they had a certain name for me because I disliked police so much when I was in television because of the things that they were doing, in my judgment, to black people in my community. But I have watched this department grow and develop and change, and to seek out accreditation that most other departments don't even bother to do. This department wants to show this community that it is accountable, that it is credible, and that it continues to work to be a better police department. Let me remind people that last year, 2019, this police department was 6 hours away from not having used their weapons all year. This department and this community worked together. We reduced crime to such an extent that people around the country were coming in to look at what this police department and the Empowerment Network and this community was doing, that we had reduced violence by nearly 89%. That is not the identity of a rogue police department. That is the identity of a police department that continues to grow and develop and change its methods for the better. I was opposed to this department for a number of years before I got on this council because of things that I saw them doing in the community. Those things have changed quite drastically. And I guess I find it, again, ironic that 5 years ago we were beating on the table for tasers and body cams and other things, and now today we're talking about the opposite because of one event. One event. George Floyd and all of the things that took place after that put us in a position where the community and the police were dealing with a crisis that neither had seen before. And, well, let me say, first of all, that I intend to support this next week because in the community that I represent, I want there to be evidence when you mess over people in my community. I want there to be evidence of that. So I'm going to continue to support this, number one, because my community demands it. And number two, because this police department deserves it. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Councilmember Festerson, you are recognized.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge the comments on mental health. I think that is a huge area of interest in this community, and until we do something about that, we aren't truly being responsive to the concerns we've been hearing all summer and that we all know are there. And I do think we have an opportunity right now between the city and the county and providers and philanthropy to really do something impactful in that area. And so although my amendment during the city budget was vetoed, I'm not done working in that area, and I do think there is the possibility to get something accomplished there in the short term, and I see that as a priority. Having said that, Deputy Chief Bank, could you come up and just answer a few questions?
Yes.
Your name and address, just for...
Michelle Bang, 505 South 15th Street.
Thank you. So as to this particular agenda item, can you tell us what would this do differently that the police department isn't already doing?
There is really no change. We already have body-worn cameras. What this is doing is this is combining multiple contracts. So as Mr. Gray stated so eloquently, 5 years ago, we did approach many members of our community who are very generous donors who helped to fund our body-worn camera program. It was incrementally rolled out. Those contracts are now starting to expire, and we are now in the place to where we made agreements and that we would eventually fund these programs within our budget, and that's where we are now. As far as the taser, as with many electronic devices, they improve over time. So that the taser is going to be an improved taser. We are at, again, another crossroads. So we have tasers. They have a 5-year life expectancy, and next year, the bulk of our tasers will be expired. And so again, we either replace those tasers or we go without. And I can make a comment to the 14-year-old and the tasers, the current tasers, and how that can improve the targeting. That is a targeting issue related to what happened to that young man. I acknowledge, like any weapon, baton, mace, they are weapons, and they're meant to cause discomfort. But the goal is to affect the arrest or to stop whatever aggression without having to escalate that situation to a deadly force scenario.
Thank you. And that was my understanding, too, that this was essentially transitioning what had been a philanthropically funded effort in previous years into a city responsibility over time.
Yes.
And it looks like if there's 586, that covers frontline police officers, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes, we're actually going to expand. So now our K-9 unit, mounted patrol unit, and some of our SROs will have the body-worn cameras.
And then can you speak to the taser a little bit, too? My understanding was there was something different that you were trying to accomplish here in terms of how they're deployed or what that policy was?
Yes, so our current taser is a single cartridge taser, which means that if the officer should miss on that first taser deployment, they're going to have to unload that cartridge and load a new taser in. The other issue is how the taser itself deploys from the weapon. Now, Axon is actually available and on watching this city council meeting if you have any other technical questions that I can't answer. But in layman's term or in my terms, our current taser, it's essentially on a electric line, okay? And so what happens is it deploys from the weapon, so the taser comes out. So all 15 feet of that line goes out with the taser. The new taser, it's going to deploy from the taser probe itself, so meaning that it only needs as much line as it needs. Additionally, it will have 2 cartridges, so we can have a close contact cartridge and one for distance. So a lot of times what's happening is we're up close when we make that decision to pull the taser and to deploy it. And it's all about the spread. So you need some distance. The taser is more effective when there is some spread between the two probes that allows the body basically, I've been tased and I do acknowledge it is uncomfortable, but it is also immediately not uncomfortable. And I was immediately able to recover from that. But essentially, it's a neuromuscular, it causes pain and it also causes your muscles not to be able to work for a brief moment of time, your skeletal muscles. The rest of me worked just fine, but I was not able to move for a short period of time. If that spread isn't wide enough, it's not as effective because it's only between the two tasers. In addition, it's the targeting of the new taser is better and how it spins. So think of a spiral football versus one that's not spiral. The spiral is going to go straighter. And so, again, with that 14-year-old, what was happening, and it wasn't simply he was driving. He was driving in a stolen car, and there was a foot pursuit as a result of that. And as he's falling, the officer is already tased. Well, that taser is already traveling, and so we are not targeting somebody in the head. We should not be, and if that is occurring, that is an issue with that officer that we would address. So that is the difference between the taser and the improved technology. So hopefully when we are engaging, it's going to be about an 80 to 90% effectiveness versus our current, which our Omaha numbers match nationally, which is around 70%.
Okay, thank you for that. And then talk about the 5-year time frame here. Why a 5-year contract?
Well, there's several reasons. It's to have stability of the program. Every year, as you know, we have to come in front of the city council and the mayor and the citizens to establish a budget. And so this provides us with some knowns. Additionally, we have, what this has allowed us to do is expand the body-worn camera program and purchase our new tasers using our existing grant funds for this next year. So in 2021, Taser has agreed to it's going to have $0 impact on our budget. And so they have agreed to do that. In 2022, it's going to be $441,000. I realize that we are in a budget crisis. I do recognize that this is a very expensive program. But what Taser has done is allowed us to, its back end is where the cost is really going to go up. And then in 2023, we'd hopefully have more planning and time to prepare for the larger outlays. So that is the reason for the 5-year contract.
Okay. And I see in our paperwork that it does note that in 2021, there's a $427,000 expense, but that's a grant-covered situation?
Yes, our grant would be able to cover. The first year's payment is going to be covered by our existing grant money.
That's, what grant is that, or what money are you referring to?
I believe that was through one of our foundations.
Okay, the philanthropic funding that was currently in play. Okay. And my understanding is, too, there's the equipment you described, but really there's the storage expense and data expense of something like this. Is that the majority of this cost, would you say?
Yes, the body-worn camera is $3.4 million of that, and unfortunately, a lot of that is the storage, and there's terabytes currently of body-worn camera footage there that is stored. And it's also it's not just storing, it's also the ability to catalog, to categorize that evidence, so what should be purged quickly, what shouldn't be, and going out and retrieving that. And it is expensive.
Okay. Okay, I think that's the end of my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Next item.
Item 24, an ordinance to approve the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program application in the amount of $348,710 for various programs during the period of October 1, 2019 to September 30th, 2023.
The public hearing for item number 24 begins at this time. Asking for proponents, and I'd like to start with Ms. Amber Parker. first, please.
Amber Parker, City of Omaha, Mayor's Office, 1819 Farnham Street. I just want to give you a little bit of background. This is the public hearing for our application for the 2020 JAG. The Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program is the primary provider of federal criminal justice funding to states and units of local government. This solicitation was opened Thursday, July 9th, 2020, and this hearing is required as part of our application process. The JAG program is designed to provide additional personnel, equipment, supplies, contractual support, training, technical assistance, and information systems for criminal justice. The JAG program is designed to assist units of local government with respect to their criminal justice needs. BJA, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, recognizes that many state and local governments are currently facing challenging fiscal environments and that an important, cost-effective way to relieve those pressures is to share or leverage resources through cooperation among federal, state, and local law enforcement. BJA intends to focus its work on addressing violent crime, enforcing firearms laws, officer safety and wellness, safe policing for safe communities, and fentanyl detection. BJA encourages each recipient of 2020 JAG awards to join federal law enforcement agencies across the board in addressing these challenges. Just to give you a history of our local process this year, local JAG projects address public safety through the provision of services to individuals and communities and by improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the criminal justice systems, processes, and procedures. The city serves as the applicant and the fiscal agent for the Omaha and Douglas County JAG. The city and county split equally the balance of the joint award after accounting for our grant administration. The City of Omaha allocates JAG funding across multiple criminal justice programs and services. Historically, this has included outreach materials, professional development, supplies and infrastructure, personnel costs, and direct services. The proposed 2020 city allocation calls for an extension of JAG resources to the Public Works Graffiti Abatement Program and the Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands Gang Prevention Specialists. The application also addresses IT infrastructure needs of the City Prosecutor's Office, which will increase transparency and efficiencies within the office. To determine the funding priorities of the Omaha Police Department, OPD command staff and the Grant Administration Unit reviewed the 2019 JAG proposal and the items in the 2021 general fund budget to determine gaps in funding and projects that fit within the OPD strategic plan. OPD's strategic plan was developed by senior command staff after several months of consideration and multiple group planning meetings. As the plan was formulated, current trends, internal and external stakeholder concerns, citizen feedback, and law enforcement best practices were considered. OPD Command evaluated the areas in which improvements and process changes will be needed, as well as potential future risks and threats. The strategic plan is a tool that OPD uses to prioritize activities and achieve outlined goals and objectives. The plan helps focus efforts and increase accountability. The items selected for funding in the 2020 application fall within 3 of the 5 goals of the OPD strategic plan, which are Goal 1, to reduce crime and increase clearance rates by utilizing best practices and collaboration during criminal investigations. Goal 2, which is to emphasize and improve police-community relations and agency diversity. And Goal 3, which is to utilize the tenets of procedural justice to inform, train, and empower all employees through accountability, action, coaching, and community partnerships. The Douglas County Criminal Justice Grant Administrator coordinates the process for Douglas County Administration to determine how the county will expend JAG funding. County-level criminal justice system partners are invited to submit funding requests to the county's grant administrator, who reviews them for suitability and allowability prior to hosting a meeting of the requesting departments. Douglas County proposals are discussed, prioritized, and selected based upon greatest need. Historically, the Sheriff's Office, County Attorney's Office, District Court, and Department of Corrections have received the majority of Douglas County's allocation. Today, there are representatives from the funded entities that are here to answer any questions that you might have about their specific items. if you have any questions for me, I'll also be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Deputy Chief Michelle Bang, Omaha Police Department, 505 South 15th Street. I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Again, my name is Ford Momarts, 3525 Cummings Street. I was pretty critical, more than I had intended to be, on the last article here. I believe that if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. I also believe that if you are going to complain, you also have to give credit where it's due. And to me, this is a slam dunk proposal, and I would favor it. I testified before the Board of Commissioners this morning that our corrections program wasn't really corrections, because it's more prison for profit. And I don't think you should have prisons for profit or policing for profit or any number of things for profit. But this, with the education added into it, does make it a correction system and not just a punishment or a vengeance system. And I think it's a very good thing. And so I would just like to give credit where it's due. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'm against this for this reason. I don't know that we can trust this money not being shifted to other things, other places, other duties. And it's a grant, not directly out of our pocket, but when that grant goes away, who pays for continuing the program? I speak as a citizen that came here today to what is called, maybe I misunderstand, but a public hearing. We didn't come here to be derided. I stand with the citizens of Omaha that will not take a knee along with other people in this city. We will defend police and law enforcement against shifting their budgets, their dollars in any way, shape, form to other programs that maybe don't make a difference. Their lives make a difference. My life makes a difference. We expect you to protect us. That's your first duty. So unless you can assure us that this money will not be given to those that are speaking prior to me, that are not derided, not recognized, then I'm against it. And I think the citizens need more than one small, fast crack at it today. How many citizens knew anything about it? They only get one crack at it for 5 minutes or less. Rules say 10 minutes on both sides if it's a presentation. This is not supposed to be a presentation. This says public hearing. Would you grant me 10 minutes, 20 minutes? I don't think so. But there are some others called proponents that often go over the 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents?
Hi, Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. Rarely do I agree with Larry, but we're both standing up in opposition to it. I wanted to point out, I agree with some of what one of the proponents said, which is excited about the education piece. Like, yeah, let's do more of that. My suggestion, which again, I don't have a lot of faith that it'll matter, since I'm here, I'll suggest it. As you're reading through it, it says law enforcement programs, prevention and education programs, prosecution and court programs, corrections and community corrections programs, planning, evaluation, technology. Anyway, I would like to just see if there would be a way, again, I've written grants over the years, and you really have to kind of point out how a grant is gonna supplement something that isn't already probably in your normal budget. I read through some of this, and it can actually pay for overtime, which I found a little bit surprising if you like really dig into the nerdery of the document. But I would just like to say, first of all, if prevention and education programs aren't already in the budget for the police, that seems problematic. But I think that this could be a cool opportunity to say, all right, it's only half, it's a fraction of the amount of what we were talking about with the prior ordinance. So since it's a small enough amount, why don't we use this as a jumping off point? Like, why don't we just go full in on prevention and education with this grant instead of all of the other things that possibly could continue to impact some of what we're seeing. And I just wanted to say specifically, Ben Gray, like, I hear you on what you said 5 years ago. People were demanding for tasers and body cameras. We've all learned a lot in the last 5 years. And I'm not, I certainly, no disrespect, but we have to be able to react a little bit more quickly to the times right now. And I don't think this is a one issue situation. Like, I've been talking with a lot of community members over the last several months, and these are issues that have been plaguing Omaha for eons, since the inception of the city. I don't have to, I feel definitely wrong to even be suggesting anything about segregation issues and just like racial discrepancies and issues in the city. But this is, again, a small way. Like, I think what would be really exciting for a lot of people is to just see like a little bit of, okay, yes, let's redirect. This is a small amount. It already has prevention and education written right into it. So what an easy amendment that could be that would really bring the community back together, as we all so agree desperately need to come together. And just take it a step at a time where we are right now. We can't change what was 5 years ago. I'm sure there was a need. Then we realized, oh man, tasers can kill people too. That's a reality that we found out in 2017 with Mr. Bare Heels, unfortunately. So we've also realized, you said you want evidence for your constituents when they get done wrong. Heck yes, 100%. That's generally not what body cam footage ends up being utilized. This is a study that Sean Guy pointed out earlier. It's not sometimes used in the way that a lot of us would like it to be used. So once again, just humble suggestion of listening to the community, redirecting this grant funding toward just prevention and education rather than more law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Councilmember Melton, you are recognized.
Yeah, if I could just call Ms. Parker up real quick, just to confirm. I'm not going to go on long. I just want you to confirm my understanding. You applied for this in 2019, correct, for a 2020 grant?
This application just went in on actually August 18th of 2020.
Okay, went in on August, and it's continuing programs that we've already had in place, because I recall when, by the way, for purposes of anyone who states that this has just come in front of the people and we don't have enough time, we've had the JAG grant on our agenda probably once a month, at least since I was elected to council in 2013. And back when I started in the county attorney's office, and that would have been in 2005, I remember one of the domestic violence prosecutors and our victim witness that helped victims of domestic violence were funded by JAG grants. So in my experience, these JAG grants have been on the city council agenda at least since 2005.
It's been a very, very long time that we've had.
So needless to say, they're not new, and I think for transparency purposes, people have had about 15 years to figure out what they're about. Second, I just want to note on here, when you apply for a grant, as I think Ms. Johnson probably knows, when you apply for grants, you get grant money for what you applied for. So to say, well, we've now changed our mind as to what we want to use it for, you're kind of stuck with what your application was for, correct? In general?
We generally, yes. We do always have the capacity to request a budget adjustment, which would have to be approved through the office chief financial officer with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. If we were directed to do so, that is what we would do. However, the departments, as I mentioned already, are dependent upon this money generally to fill gaps in their budgets, and they depend on that year by year. Also, half of this money goes to Douglas County. That's our agreement with them. So it's not just the city's purview. Essentially, it's a joint venture here, and we work in collaboration with the county.
Right, and the county has already allocated that. It was part of the grant application, so we couldn't very well say, no, by the way, we're not going to let this go to Douglas County, and we're going to throw it all into education or somewhere else where somebody just feels like it needs to go, because this is a lot of work with a lot of collaboration for a lot of different entities.
Yes.
In the Douglas County and the city of Omaha.
Yes, we put a MOU through the Douglas County Board, I believe it was August 11th. Yes, it passed through there too, and that was part of our application as well. We had to enter into an MOU with the county that agreed that we would split this money the way that we're splitting it, that we would use it for the purposes stated in the application.
And the Omaha Police Department's actually funding expanding the mental health co-responder program, which would help the Omaha Police having the co-responders for mental health, having the licensed mental health
They're expanding
practitioners.
the co-responder program in their actual general fund budget, yes.
And that's what part of this money would help fund for that funding. At least it's attached for your, on page 1 of 17, on what was attached to our agenda.
That's in their decision-making process, why they did not direct funds specifically to mental health this year as they assessed the concerns of the department, that they were already putting that into their general fund dollars. So they continue to use their JAG money for what they had traditionally used that JAG money for, which is a clerk typist position and overtime, and then the Boys and Girls Club's allocation to the gang specialists and so on and so forth. So they considered that need at the time of writing the application. However, they already directed general fund dollars to that need.
Okay, so because they're already directing general fund,
Right.
Otherwise they would have wanted this money to go to the co-responder.
Right, they're acknowledging that they could have, and they're acknowledging how they used their budget dollars to do so.
Okay, and then confirming that they have the co-responder mental health
Yes.
program in place.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that it's important to know that we have money, where our money is going and what it's going for, and then that they're making sure that the mental health component is in place for the Omaha Police.
Correct, and the grant funds, they fluctuate year by year. They're a formula grant program, so honestly, the co-responder model being on the city's general fund dollars is more stable than placing it on grant funds, which can fluctuate year by year and are never guaranteed.
Right, because again, like the comment from one of the opponents, well, what happens when these grant funds end? Then we'll have to pay for it. Well, actually, no. I remember there was a grant-funded position in the county attorney's office at one point. The grant ended,
It may
and
go
the
away.
position was eliminated.
Correct.
And so we were down an attorney because there was no grant funding for it.
And that is
But I
one of
think
the questions or considerations whenever we talk about personnel, is what is the sustainability plan for that position? So it is a big concern.
And again, we have the money, so right now, if we can't just redirect it necessarily somewhere else. We'd have to give it back to the federal government if we didn't use it.
On this one, the project period is October 1st, 2019 through September 30th of 2023. So as I mentioned, we do have the opportunity to do budget adjustments. We would still have to stay within the funding priorities of BJA for the JAG program. We would submit that. We would ask for consideration. We could make amendments. That would be at the direction of the departments, the county.
But it would be coordinated. This
Yes.
council can't just
Correct.
do that on our own, or we probably
That wouldn't be
want
the
to.
traditional process.
Okay, because there's more than just the city who's counting on this at this point and who are part of the application process.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Ms. Park. And by the way, I appreciate all the work, because anyone that has applied for grants knows the amount of work that goes into these, and the audit process that you go through, which somebody said, who knows what you're using it for? There's an audit process for all of these funds, am I correct?
Correct.
And especially when it comes to these federal funds, that you have audit requirements.
Yes, we just had a desk audit a week ago on one of our federal grants.
And those
So-
are independent audits, correct? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Parker. I
You bet.
appreciate it. Nothing further.
Seeing no other lights, next item.
Item 25, an ordinance to approve a local authority business economic opportunity program agreement with Merck Animal Health to facilitate a road project at 21401 West Center Road.
The public hearing on item 25 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Kevin Anderson, City of Omaha Mayor's Office, here to introduce and lend support for this partnership of three different entities, those being the City of Omaha, State of Nebraska Department of Transportation, and Merck Animal Health. This agreement entails the City of Omaha provide project management and construction oversight of NDOT-funded improvements to Center Street at 214th. These improvements supports Merck's investment of $130 million of expanded R&D facility and the addition of 50 research and development jobs. Merck is providing the matching funds associated with the project, so we're here to support. I want to thank the Law Department and Public Works for going above and beyond in their support of this endeavor. At the end of the day, this is another one of those fantastic investments in the Omaha Metro that I hope doesn't fly under the radar. So I want to make it kind of well known of just the impact that this may have for the City of Omaha, the metro area, and thank Merck especially for their investment. So I'll stick around for any questions you might have. Otherwise, Mr. Levy is here representing the company, is available as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice President, council members. David Levy, Baird Home Law Firm, 1700 Farnham Street. Here on behalf of Merck, really just want to thank the mayor's office and Kevin, Public Works Department, for all their work on this. It really is truly a public-private partnership for the benefit of Omaha. I want to encourage your support for this next week when you vote on it, of course, as well. Would appreciate that. And lastly, I do want to say, while I have you all here, that Merck has said to me more than once that they really appreciate Omaha as a place to do business and a place to invest. And I'm sure that's in no small part to the work you all do here every week. So I want to let you know that they appreciate Omaha, like doing business here, and thank you for creating those conditions or helping to create those conditions that have them wanting to make major investments in our community. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Item 26, an ordinance to amend Section 30-263 of the Omaha Municipal Code entitled Fireworks Sales to amend the application period and deadlines to create a process to change locations of consumer fireworks sales permits and to harmonize provisions.
The public hearing for item 26 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Make this quick. Vince Bellino Fireworks, 501 Olson Drive. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't know if I'm a proponent, opponent, just some general comments from us applying, I guess, with the organizations. I guess I'll just first ask the question if there's a reason for bringing the application period earlier in the year. Good, bad, indifferent. Out of the 200 locations we apply at, this would be the earliest out of any of the applications that are due. Most of them are due maybe February to March, so this would be a little bit earlier than others. If this does move forward, I guess it would be nice if we could also then have a couple recommendations that go with it. Maybe we could also award the permits earlier, allow for some better planning that go along with maybe 6-7 months in advance of having the ability to plan for locations. And lastly, I'll just put it out there that it's still in there, but to keep the change of location is essential for these organizations to keep that in there in the ordinance. Applying in November and knowing where you're going to sell fireworks in June or July, it's hard to know. So landlords sell lots, they get developed, so make sure we keep that in there. It's essential for these organizations to change and be able to allow to change. I'll answer any questions with regards to how we apply. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Pauls, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish Chris were here today because Chris, Vinny, and I are on the law committee. We discuss this every year. We try to make this better. And just to give you an idea, this year we had some discussion of literally doing away with fireworks. So it runs all, we had discussed how some of the cities around us are actually increasing their times. And we did find out one of the earliest ones is in December. So we're not too far out of line. we talked to a couple nonprofits, and they said that the sooner they would know, it would help them. Even if they know they may not get it, it sort of helps them visualize what they could be getting, because they do count on this money. Let me see. Well, I just wrote down a couple. And some vendors have said we give the information to them too late, so that's why we're moving this up. And I think we have given them adequate amount of time, because this is not a new business. We found out over the last few years, basically we have the same vendors, so they know how to operate. They're all businessmen and women, so we figured they could work through this. And we request from the vendors the information that the nonprofits get, because we just like to have some feeling. We get it from everyone up on time. One of them says, oh no, you don't need that right now. So what they're saying to us, I have to smile. We ask for them for some information, and they don't give it back to us because, well, it's not in there. We're trying to make this the best for nonprofits. We want the vendors to make their money, and I'm sure they do. I don't know, because I don't know the business equation they work under. But we can discuss this again with our committee and see if we do need to fine tune it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pauls. Next item.
Non-action items, items 27 through 39, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
And as a reminder, the City Council will not meet on October 13th, 2020. Roll call?
Pauls. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Meeting is adjourned at 4:06.